Hi, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our webinar, Rethinking the Support Center, New Efficiencies for a New Era. Before we get going, a few housekeeping items. There is a questions panel on the right throughout the webinar. If you have questions, please submit those and we'll answer those at the end. Before we get going, I am going to read a quick disclaimer and then I'll toss it to Rick and Bryce. So the information provided here is for educational purposes, and FRLA does not warrant or induce any particular provider. FRLA is prohibited from providing specific legal, financial, or accounting advice, and the information represented here is not intended as such. FRLA encourages businesses to consult qualified, competent advisors in these fields to explore their specific situation. This webinar is being recorded for future use by the association and other industry members. Your participation in the call is deemed to be your consent to the recording. So with that, I'm going to introduce Rick Van Warner and Bryce Woodyard with FTR Hospitality.
Thank you. Just a real quick overview about FTR. We're a full service outsource accounting and technology company, and we also do some consulting as well. We are vertically integrated. We only serve multi-unit restaurant groups from 4 to 400 in general. Sometimes a little more. We might go as small as 3 in certain cases. We really are focused on helping owners streamline their back office operations so they can really put their full focus on running the day-to-day in the 4 walls and on their business growth. We are a company that is full of people that have spent a lot of their lives in the restaurant industry. So we get it. We understand the pain points that people are facing every day, and we've been there, and we've got a track record to solving them. And then lastly, everything we do is very customized to each particular group's needs. So next slide, please. So we all know about this. Certainly, we're in a different era than we've been ever before. The labor costs, the dramatic minimum wage hikes are game changers for our industry. With all the stimulus and et cetera, a lot of folks, particularly here in Florida, are facing a huge employee shortage. Of course, the whole labor cost is hitting the supply chain as well, and those increases are being passed along. And then just unprecedented changes in technology in the last few years, and things are changing so quickly that you might be up to speed on something this year, but by the same time next year, it could be obsolete. So next slide, please. So in light of all that, the real question that we're going to talk about today is how do we become more efficient and protect our profitability in a way that does not directly impact the employee or the guest experience, obviously, because we can't afford to do that. So with that, I'm going to go to the next slide and kick it over to Bryce, who's our head of FTR Hospitality.
Thanks, Rick. So, in a typical, restaurant environment, let's call it 10 years ago, right? They've got, a back office, and you've got, as it says on the slide, your kind of HR person, maybe a marketing person, some accountants, and IT. And during the pandemic, if we've learned anything is that a lot of these functions can be done remotely. So even if it's not outsourcing, I think the question becomes, do you really need an office space? And from our experience, just having an office kind of leads to it being a repository for stuff that you don't know where to put, whether that's paperwork, old restaurant equipment, and you're paying basically rent and utilities to house all that stuff. Do you need to pay for the phone system there? Do ops teams hang out there? So there's a lot of kind of questions you have to ask yourself of, do you really need an office going forward? And, we work with a lot of different groups at different levels, and a lot of them are rethinking this exact question is, do we need the office? And, we've got a very, very large 100+ location restaurant group that is actually getting rid of their office. So, even if you're small or large, the question I think needs to be asked. Next slide, please. Next slide. There we go.
No, go back one.
Nope. Sorry, my fault there. So, and kind of the other question too, and I touched on this earlier, is, you know, the question here, with the speed that technology is changing, are we falling behind, right? So this kind of begs the question on, is it you know, good for you to outsource certain parts of your technology? You know, we saw with online ordering, right? You know, it is the, you know, 20-year IT manager that's, you know, gone around to your 5 or 6 locations and serviced them. You know, is he or she caught up on online ordering? You know, the question is usually, or the answer is usually a no. So there's a lot of, you know, factors here too, just by how everything's been automated, streamlined, and synced together. You know, are you falling behind? And a lot of times, you know, your internal IT department, you're not going to the FS techs or the, you know, watching, you know, different webinars or looking at different technology because you're comfortable with where you're at. But, you know, being comfortable isn't, you know, necessarily best in class, right? So there's kind of that consideration to think about as well, is, you know, are you using the best in class technology, and or is there better tech out there? So that's kind of it goes hand in hand with the real estate question too, right? It's of, you know, what does your support center look like? Are you the traditional support center, or do you have the ability to kind of go sort of the next level, where we're seeing an acceleration in outsourcing, an acceleration in, you know, getting rid of your back office? Next slide, please. So, you know, with these rapid advances of technology, you can kind of see there's a big list here of, you know, there's third-party delivery. It's been a big change, especially over the last year. You know, you've got DoorDash, Uber Eats, Postmates, and that's just, you know, 3 out of the 40 that are available. You've got a bunch of online ordering platforms out there, you know, marketing analytics software. You know, there's all these tools, and the biggest challenge that a lot of, especially smaller restaurant groups, are dealing with is how do you integrate and link them all together? And so that's where, you know, potentially using an outsourced partner who deals with that on a regular basis, who's got a big team that deals with a bunch of different technologies, that's where you may want to look at looking at that technology. Because there's so much out there, it's changing so fast, especially now, that, you know, this is the perfect time to reevaluate it. Is my kind of traditional support center team and office space what I need to do? Next slide, please. So here's just a kind of a quick example, and sorry to go through this quickly, I'll try to slow it down here, but you know, this is an 8-unit restaurant group that we, just looking at their back office, doing a support center assessment. You know, they were using redundant technology. They actually had 2 online ordering platforms that, you know, one of them they didn't actually know that they were paying for. So we were able to save them, you know, $68,000 there. The accounting and tech teams, you know, for an 8-unit restaurant group, they had, I think, 5 people in accounting and tech, which is probably a little too big. And so we were able to save just by saving on salaries. And then just closing the support center, you know, we saved them another $190,000. And remember, this is just an 8-unit restaurant group. And we saved them, you know, $700,000 just by taking a quick look at their teams. And, you know, the remote office is, or the closing the support center is more than just rent and utilities. It's, you know, paperwork cost, it's IT, it's internet, it's phone systems, it's, you know, certain pieces of equipment that you house in there. So there's a lot more to it than just looking at, oh, you know, I pay $5,000 a month in rent. And, you know, a lot of the in-person meetings can be handled at a restaurant, is what we've noticed. And so we do support center assessments for restaurants across the country. And so we've got a, you know, I think a pretty good handle on, you know, what you can and can't do. There's some groups that it might not be a good option, but, you know, this is a pretty common case for us where we're saving, you know, restaurant groups kind of 6 figures just by evaluating the support center. You know, even if you take away the outsourcing piece, we're still looking at a $250,000 savings. And, you know, for an 8-unit restaurant group, that's a big deal. Final slide here. Rick, I don't know if you want to take it home on right side.
Sure. I really think you got to start asking yourself some hard questions, right? How much could you really save by having a virtual office versus a physical office? How much more expertise and value could be realized through outsourcing? You know, traditionally we tended to look at IT as a cost center, It really today, IT, you have to look at it not only as an expense saver, but also a top line builder. Because if you're not utilizing the tools that are out there to drive sales and to make better decisions, then you're missing out. How many third party delivery, several of you have been through tablet hell like we had back when I was at Tijuana Flats, for instance, where you've got multiple tablets for different third-party delivery platforms. How many sales dollars are you using because somebody shuts those tablets off at a peak period, or they're just not working properly, or we've got a lousy online ordering system where people start to put their order in the cart and there's an abandon. They abandon because they get so frustrated with the spinning wheel or it's not working properly. How many dollars are we wasting in the office just through doing things the way we've always done them versus taking advantage of new tools that are out there designed specifically to be more efficient and to better manage your labor, better manage your inventory and food costs? Do your marketing and operations people, do they really have the data that they need to drive traffic, both repeat and new business? Or are they struggling just to get the information they need to do their jobs? And what's the cost of turnover that results from, let's face it, today's employee base, and we're having a tough time getting new employees. We're not giving them the scheduling tools and the apps that are, the way they can manage their schedules and do things online, as they're used to. That's a frustrating experience. I mean, there's an expectation now that in our employee base that we are going to be up to speed on technology, and how many people are we losing who just decide that they'd rather work somewhere that's more with it than our place. So there's a lot of considerations here. We've thrown a lot of questions out. Love to get some of your questions, and we can go to the next slide. I think that's basically, the time has come. The silos have crumbled between all the traditional silos we used to have between finance and operations and account and marketing and HR, et cetera. This is the time with the industry facing the challenges it's facing. Where else are you going to be able to save costs, right? It's pretty, without taking price and without taking steps that are going to reduce service or reduce the customer experience or the employee experience, where really the last frontier to kind of get some expense and efficiencies in the operation is back office. So questions, I don't see any up on the board, but okay, here we go. Somebody said, Ashley, maybe you read these for me if you don't mind. So I'm having trouble seeing it. Okay, this one says,
I've got it, Rick. So the question is,
okay.
Has FTR done an analysis on the effect of outsourcing versus company culture on eliminating the support office? So, it's kind of, I think it's kind of hard to measure the exact effects, right? Because it's a little bit ambiguous, but, at least from our experience, what we've done is just be incredibly flexible. So, we've got situations where, we are still working with an internal team on some things. The group that we gave an example for earlier on in the slideshow, so we've got their, we do their accounting and technology, but we work with an HR person, we work with a marketing person, and we work with their ops team. And part of the reason, and actually probably the main reason why we kind of start at 3 or 4 locations and go up, is because, if we're going to put a team on it, it's going to be a dedicated team. And the reason for that is exactly that question, is to, look at the culture and make sure that the culture, that our employees feel like they're part of that restaurant group. And so that's one of the things that we do that helps with that culture. Is that they're dedicated to that restaurant brand. And, if we had like a 1-off or a 2-off restaurant group, it's very hard to dedicate, a full-time team member at least. So, that's one of the ways we mitigate it, and then, being able to be flexible with how we outsource is kind of another way we mitigate that culture issue. And sometimes there's ways where we can do an on-site visit so that everybody's very comfortable with our team. And I'll say it's not always perfect. And to the original question, we haven't done a specific study on how it's impacted the culture, but it kind of also begs the question too of how have you met over the pandemic, and what's happened to the company culture there. I think what's happened over the last year is kind of a good case study on whether or not outsourcing or just eliminating the back office is a good thing. I mean, was everybody meeting over Zoom meetings? Were you meeting in the restaurants? Because that can still happen if you eliminate the support center.
Yeah, I would add in that in most cases that I'm aware of, it's been a positive to the culture, because if you've got operators in the organization that are frustrated because there's one under-resourced IT guy that really isn't up to speed on the latest stuff, and they're having headaches there, that's a frustration for the culture. I also think, in cases, we're not just displacing people, we're not just laying people off. In a lot of cases, we're bringing the people who are qualified and have and are good at their jobs, we're bringing them onto the FTR team. And people, in some cases, they stay right in the location of or they work remote, but they'll be, they don't even have to move to Florida, right, to work for us. And I can tell you that people consider us just like we're on their team. We just happen to now be remote, as opposed to being in an office. So we have some larger clients where the controller or the head of IT on our side meets with the CEO once a week, has a standing call just like any of his other direct reports. We're included in the company meetings, and we're included in so we assimilate into the culture, as it's just a different, it's a higher expertise, higher value, and usually save some money way of doing it versus the way it was traditionally done, where most support center employees came from the restaurants initially. Other questions? Can we answer anything else?
Hey, Ashley. Oops.
Yes.
Ashley, can you hear me? I got a couple questions.
I can.
Folks. Rick, if you have less than 4 units, I know you guys said something about your 4 units or more. There's probably some folks that have less than 4 units. What would you recommend? Is there other companies like yours or other folks that do this that you would recommend?
Well, it's, at 3 or less restaurants, typically, you're not going to have much of a support center, if any, right? So, I'll let Bryce jump in on that. But yeah, no, I think that there certainly are resources for pieces of what we do. For instance, IT. There's resources out there for 1 or 2 unit, 3 unit groups for helping them, become more efficient on the IT side. Similarly, accounting, there are independent resources out there, independent CFO consultant types, that could handle a 1 or 2 or 3 units. For us, to realize the efficiencies that we can help people with, it tends to be 3 units or more. And Bryce, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would agree, and I would say though, we can certainly help to take a look at that. I think for us, typically our ongoing services make sense at the 3 units plus, but we're certainly happy to answer questions if you have a few, and we can certainly take a look at the 1, 2, or 3 unit groups, because a lot of things, a lot of situations that we see, unfortunately, is if you run into a sales rep for a specific product, right, they're going to push that product, and so it's very hard to get an honest assessment of or a lay of the land just by asking a sales rep what they recommend. So we're certainly happy to field questions, hopefully take a look at your tech stack. Maybe we can give some quick thoughts, and that And
Well,
yeah,
the reason, Bryce, the reason I'm asking, I think with minimum wage, you know, the increase in minimum wage, with all the PPP programs, with all the stuff going on, it seems like, you know, the bigger companies have some resources and the smaller ones don't. And it seems like they're reaching out for companies like you or similar companies. That's why I asked the question. And my other question is, are you seeing an increase in those states that saw an increase in minimum wage? Are you seeing an increase in business, phone calls, et cetera?
absolutely. So our number one state where we have the most locations is actually California, if that says anything. You know, number two state is probably you know, Arizona or New York, and then Florida is the number 3 or 4 state. So, you know, it kind of goes to the point we talked about earlier in the slide show of, okay, if you're not going to take price, or if that's part of the mix, and or if you're looking at reducing, you know, labor in the store, but you can't really reduce anymore, you know, where do you look? And that's, you know, kind of where this whole presentation is getting at, is the support center. I mean, there's a lot of cost buried in there where, you know, if it's the way you've been doing it for the last 15, 20 years, you know, there's probably, you know, a more efficient way to do it. And so, you know, it's probably the final way to kind of take costs without killing the customer experience, or to find savings. So
My last question is, let's say someone's interested in looking at you guys as coming in, you can come in and do an evaluation and say, well, you're probably doing things pretty well. We can't save you a lot of money. You're better off what you're doing. Do you do some type of evaluation and tell people you don't need us? Because, does that make sense?
yeah. And you know, actually Rick and I had a call about you know, 6 months ago. So, you know, feel free to reach out to us. First of all, you know, we can do a free assessment. But, you know, we had a somewhat local restaurant group based out of Orlando. I think there were 8 or 9 locations at the time. And we just, you know, went through a couple questions, asked them, you know, how do you, you know, what's your POS system? What's your accounting software? You know, how do you do this? How do you do that? And, you know, by the end of the call, I said, hey, like, you know, you guys are doing it right. You know, good job. You know, if you need anything in the future, let us know. I mean, that's how the call went. You know, there's not much we could have offered them in terms of savings or efficiencies. So, you know, but we just gave an honest opinion and told them how we could help, and, you know, went our separate ways. And so, you know, if you have an efficient process and procedures, and you've got an efficient tech stack, we'll certainly let you know, because, you know, we're going to walk into a relationship. We want to be able to provide value.
Great, thank you. Ashley, do you have other questions?
There's one here. What is the value add FTR brings over a back office support software like R365, Compete, etc.?
So we actually use those softwares. So, you know, we're a Restaurant 365 partner, so we can do our own implementations with the product, and we use the product. Same thing with Compete, the same deal. So those are the types of tools where, you know, we can come in, bring those in, install it for you, and, you know, even just show your team how to use it. It doesn't have to be an outsourcing situation, but that's, you know, certainly those are 2 of the softwares in our toolkit. You know, Restaurant 365.
The value add.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
to that point, the value add that we have is, number one, I mean, we're agnostic on the tools as far as the accounting software like R365 or the POS or the, you know, third-party deliveries like Olo kind of integrators and et cetera. We're agnostic on all that, but we have relationships with all those companies. So in most cases, we can get you better pricing on those systems if we go in and we do a free assessment and find out that you could really use this one or that one. Typically, we're able to get much better pricing than you could get on your own, just because of the scale that we have working across numerous clients and working and having partnership agreements with these various providers. So that's I'd say that's probably that's another value add.
And that's something pretty common that we do, is kind of look at the technology stack. You know, we can kind of evaluate the POS system that you're using and planning on plugging into one of these accounting softwares, and, you know, your inventory software. If you're not using 365, you know, we can, you know, we use it all. And, you know, we use, you know, different POS systems. Like Rick said, we're agnostic, different accounting systems. I mean, we've got, 70, 80 employees here in St. Pete, and all they do is restaurant accounting and technology. So, we can certainly provide you with some, good things about a product and certainly some bad things as well. And that's kind of where one of our big advantages lies.
Any other questions?
I think that those are all the questions for today that are coming in. And, if that's okay with you, Rick and Bryce, I'll provide your contact information whenever we email the recording out, so people can contact you for any questions they may have.
Hey, Ashley, I'd just like to thank again Bryce and Rick. Besides doing these webinars for us, they've been instrumental answering questions to some of our small restaurateurs, to our big ones, especially when it came to the PPP, the RRF, or all those other funds out there. And they've answered any of our questions or our members' questions. And I appreciate it, Rick. I appreciate Bryce. That goes a long way with the membership. And we appreciate you guys doing these webinars. Thank you so much. Back to you, Ashley.
That's it for today. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Take care.